Welcome everyone to this edition of Maza's Musings. We're switching things up a little bit this week, and we are going to be talking with G. Michael Dobbs. Mike Dobbs, for those who are not in the Western Massachusetts area, is a longtime media member here in Western Massachusetts. He has spent decades working in newspapers, talk radio. He ran his own animation magazine for some time, and now he is retired after serving as executive editor at Reminder Publishing for more than 20 years. And I swear he's busier now than he was before, because he just recently published 2 books, and he's launched his own podcast called The Ink-stained Wretch. We're going to be talking about both of his books. We'll be talking about the podcast, and we sprinkle in a little bit of other stuff along the way. We'll also have another Maza's Mickey Minute, which I promise will be close to a minute this time. I want to thank everybody who has taken the time to listen to this podcast and ask you to share it with your friends or your family or your coworkers. Let people know by sharing our social media. We have the Maza's Musings podcast on Facebook. We are on Instagram at Maza's Musings Pod. We also have a website, mazasmusings.wordpress.com. And you can always reach out to me directly via email at mazasmusings@gmail.com. If you have any questions about the podcast, any suggestions, any requests on what we should do next, love to hear all of it. I'd also ask that you leave a rating or a review on whatever platform you are listening to this podcast on. The ratings and reviews help boost us in the algorithms that suggest different podcasts to people out there on the internet, and it really just makes it easier for folks to find us. So again, thank you for listening to this podcast, and thank you for helping us grow. Now that that's said, let's get to the podcast. And here we go.
Donald, wake up! It's showtime! Don't forget the orchestra.
Ah, there you are. And just in time.
Mom says there's even more magical stuff now.
For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the doors.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, cause this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
And here we go!
Well, before I talk with Mike Dobbs, I'm bringing you your Maza's Mickey Minute. We're going to be going over some things that happened over the past couple of weeks at Disney and some news that was released and things to look forward to. Now, the first thing that we're going to get to is Test Track is officially closed. Guests took their last ride on the second version of Test Track at Epcot, as the ride is being reimagined once again. The attraction closed at the end of the day on Sunday, June 16th, and by the next day, construction walls were already up. Now, at this point, there's very little known about what the future holds for what was always a popular attraction. In fact, over the last 90 days, Test Track had one of the longest wait times at just under an hour, according to thelaughingplace.com. That made it the 7th longest wait time during that period. And from my experience, that's always been the case. It's always been a really popular ride. So perhaps at the upcoming D23 in Anaheim in August, we'll learn more. Emily did mention that there was big news that was going to be coming out at D23 this year.
From what they were telling us, there is some really, really hot tea that is going to be coming out of the D23. Josh Tomorrow made a video that we saw before they started doing this whole presentation for us. And he basically said in his own words, buckle up, because you think that all of this news that you're about to hear is exciting. Get ready. So I can't wait to see what is reported out from that.
And actually, in fact, my friend Dan will be there, and he's agreed to come on the podcast to talk about what we've learned and his impressions from the expo. So be on the lookout for that. Now, also, Tiana's Bayou Adventure at Walt Disney World will open to the public next Friday, June 28th. This, of course, is the reimagining of Splash Mountain, featuring Tiana and friends from The Princess and the Frog, like Prince Naveen, Mama Odie, and Louis the Alligator. And there are also a number of new characters. The premise of this ride is that Tiana is preparing for a big party and needs the help of her friends around the bayou to put together a band for the celebration. Now, I talked with Emily from We Do Travel Right about the ride in our previous podcast, so if you'd like to know more about that, be sure to give that a listen. Virtual queue will be in place when Tiana's Bayou Adventure opens, and guests will need to use the My Disney Experience app to enter the attraction. There will not be a standby queue available during the initial opening days of this attraction, but you can use a Lightning Lane entrance that's offered through Genie Plus. Moving from land to sea, Disney Cruise Line recently released its itineraries for fall 2025 through spring 2026. The bookings will open to the public on June 28th, but Castaway Club members can take advantage of early booking windows. Pearl Castaway Club members can take advantage of booking windows on Monday, June 24th. Platinum Castaway members, Golden Oak, and Club 33 members, that's open to them on Tuesday, June 25th. Gold Castaway Club members, that's Wednesday the 26th. And Silver Castaway Club members, Disney Vacation Club members, and Adventure Insiders can start booking on Thursday, June 27th. Now, 4 ships, the Disney Fantasy, the Disney Wish, the Disney Treasure, and the Disney Dream, will regularly sail to one or both of Disney Cruise Line's signature island destinations. That's Disney's Castaway Cay and Disney's Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point. Of course, Emily from We Do Travel Right was just on the podcast to talk about Lookout Cay. So to learn more about that, go check out that episode. There are other tropical itineraries as well that include the Pacific Coast and the Gulf of Mexico, and those are in late 2025 and early 2026. Third season of voyages will go to Australia, New Zealand, and the South Pacific on the Disney Wonder from October 2025 to February 2026. As part of Disney Cruise Line's themed sailings, holiday cruises will include Halloween on the High Seas and a Very Merry Time sailings, and those will take place in September, October, November, and December of 2025. I know that Eileen and I currently have a placeholder that needs to be used, so this may be something that we're looking at. In fact, Eileen may have already been poking around at this. And last but not least, for the 4th of July, Disney will celebrate American independence in style at Walt Disney World once again, and there are several things planned. There's a special fireworks show called Disney's Celebrate America, a 4th of July concert in the sky, and that returns to Magic Kingdom July 3rd and 4th at 9:20 p.m. There'll also be a dance party in front of Cinderella's castle and throughout the park. At Epcot, a special patriotic fireworks display called the Heartbeat of Freedom will follow the new Epcot fireworks show Luminous, the Symphony of Us on July 3rd and July 4th at 9 p.m. Also, Portraits of Courage, a Commander-in-Chief's tribute to America's warriors, is a special exhibit from the George W. Bush Institute. And it debuted on June 9th, and it continues to be on display. And of course, Spaceship Earth will be shimmering in red, white, and blue. This is all in addition to special photo ops with Disney characters in their Spirit of 76 attire throughout the day at the American Adventure in Epcot. Well, folks, that is today's Maza's Mickey Minute, and that one actually did take close to a minute. You know what else only takes a minute? Getting your free vacation quote from We Do Travel Right. We Do Travel Right is your authorized Disney vacation planner and prestigious Earmark Gold producer. Emily and her team specialize in concierge vacation planning, including the We Do Travel Right dining team. and they take away the stress and let you get back to the best part of your vacation, and that's having fun. In addition to Disney, We Do Travel Right can help you with planning trips to Universal Studios, cruise lines, all-inclusive vacations. Whatever you're interested in, they can find an expert for you. The best part is they do all of it for free. That's right, you do not pay an extra cent. Companies like Disney already build the cost of an agent into their prices, so when you book with We Do Travel Right, the company pays them directly. The We Do Travel Right team is the best at finding value for you, so if there's a deal out there that's going to work for you and your family, they'll find it for you. So visit WeDoTravelRight.com/Maza. That's WeDoTravelRight.com/MAZA to get your free vacation quote today with zero obligation. And if you've already booked a trip recently and want someone to take the hassle off your plate, you can transfer your trip to We Do Travel Right and the team will do the rest. So check out WeDoTravelRight.com/Maza. Again, that's WeDoTravelRight.com/MAZA and get your next magical adventure started today.
Well, I can't do any more damage around this popsicle stand.
So long, partner.
See you real soon.
All right. Well, I am here with G. Michael Dobbs, Mike Dobbs, who has had an illustrious career in the world of journalism in Western Massachusetts here. In fact, Mike, I'm coming up on a pretty big day. We're for everybody's reference, we're recording this on Wednesday, June 19th. Do you have any idea what June 20th is?
I would assume your wedding anniversary?
No, close. It's actually June 20th, 2010 was when I started at the Reminder.
There you go.
So Mike Dobbs actually was the man who hired me for better or worse. I like to think it's more better, but all those years ago. And so I'm appreciative to him for that. And I'm appreciative for him taking the time to join me today. Mike, I know I gave a little bit of a brief introduction, but if you'd like to let everybody know who may not know a little bit about you.
Let's see. I'm supposed to be retired. I don't think I'm actually quite retired, at least by the definition that most people assume. I'm just, I've adapted and embraced this name that former Chicopee Mayor Michael Bissonnette gave me, which he looked at me one day as I walked into his office and he says, "Dobbs, you ink-stained wretch," which is a 19th century term for a reporter. Ink-stained, that should be pretty obvious because we didn't have ballpoints. We had fountain pens at that time of our history. And wretch because, well, do I have to tell you, Chris, why reporters are a little bit wretched? Generally, it was because we work very hard and we don't get very much pay. And I fully embrace that. Just so you know, I started my writing career in 1975 as a freelancer for the late and lamented Valley Advocate alternative newspaper. And I just have kept writing and working in communications pretty much ever since then. I've been lucky enough to work in different mediums. I just had my 10-year anniversary working for Focus Springfield, which is our cable access station here in the city of Springfield. They actually let me on television, which I'm never quite used to. I did talk radio for 5 years, commercial talk radio. I co-owned a nationally distributed magazine and edited and wrote for that. I've got, how many books is it now? I think it's 8 books under my belt. 2 more are being planned. Started a podcast because we don't have enough podcasts in this country. God damn it. I admire what you're doing, Chris, with your podcasts. Um, if regular listeners haven't glommed on to the fact of your absolute love and devotion to all things Disney, then they're not paying too close attention. For me, I really wanted to do something where I could talk to interesting people. Some of it is arts, entertainment. Some of it will be history. Some of it will be politics. So I'm a geezer. I'm working my way through learning a new medium, and I'm having fun while I do it. Whether or not it's going to result in any money, who knows? But I'll do it for a while, and if things pan out the right way, that'd be great. And I still write a little bit for the Reminder. So I just, what can I say? I fell in love with journalism and fell in love with media at a relatively young age, and it still is one of the core aspects of my life, and so I'm still doing stuff.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned that you are writing for the Reminder still, one of the things that you do is still contribute a regular column to the opinion page. And one of the most controversial issues that you have brought up in a while was Grace the Pages just recently, and that is whether ketchup should go on a hot dog. Now,
well, yeah.
I know that you kind of reached out to the social media sphere to kind of get some feedback on that, but I'm not sure if you have actually taken a solid stand on this yourself. So where do you stand in the great hot dog debate?
I will tell you, Chris, by what I put on my hot dog, which is mustard and relish. That's what I do. Yes. I was somewhere on the social interwebs, and it was a hot dog day. And so I went there's a trade group for the hot dog industry. It's like the National Hot Dog and Sausage Board. And they had a whole freaking page chock full of do's and don'ts about hot dogs. And it said flat out that if you're under the age of 18, ketchup is acceptable because you're just a dumb kid. But if you're over the age of 18, you should leave childish things behind, and adopt mustard and relish or chopped onions or chili, any of that. I have to admit, one of my favorite places to eat a hot dog is Doogie's in Berlin, Connecticut, the home of the 2-foot-long Frank. And yes, it's actually one continuous 2-foot length of hot dog made special for them. And honestly, I don't think I've ever seen anyone other than little kids at Doogie's put ketchup on their hot dogs. Of course, I didn't get into the second real issue, Chris, which is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh man, that is just you're really asking for it if you were to broach that one. I feel like this is a debate that we had in the newsroom on more than one occasion, and it really is a divisive issue.
People believe you have meat encased in bread, and that constitutes a sandwich. And then you have other people believing it's got to be two separate pieces of bread. It can't be like a roll. So I don't know. I didn't tread into those waters. But I think that you and I talked about is a hot dog a sandwich, and was joined in by other members of the staff on that pertinent issue, that mind-boggling issue.
See, these are the little intricacies of the newsroom that people don't really appreciate unless you're there. This is the hard-hitting topics that we really dive into behind closed doors in the newsroom.
Well, yeah. That and talking smack about elected officials behind their back after we've gone and covered them and they've done something dumb.
Of course.
But yes, and that's one reason I love the newsroom. I love that part of the job so much. Because I look back at the 22 years at the Reminder, and frankly, were there some sort of rotten apples? Absolutely. There absolutely were some rotten apples. But not very many. And most of them, we had hardworking, good people, intelligent people with good points of view, willing to question things. And it's, so you can talk about major issues, or you can talk about whether or not you should put ketchup on a hot dog. And it all just it was all just part of the flow of conversation there.
Absolutely. Well, hey, you seem to be just as busy, if not busier, in retirement than you were otherwise. And maybe it was just, we weren't quite aware of all the things that you had going on in the background, outside of the newsroom. But you lately have had a lot going on. You mentioned you're now up to 8 books. You're working on the podcast. You're still doing stuff with Focus Springfield. So I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about some of the most recent developments, some of the most recent things that you've been working on. And I thought I'd start with, this is actually the second one that you've done, I believe, on this particular topic. But you recently published a book, Made of Pen and Ink, the Fleischer Studios, the Florida Years.
Right.
So before we dive into the book itself, there may be people listening who aren't familiar with Fleischer, and so could you kind of just give a brief explanation as to who this is and where they might recognize some of the work from?
Absolutely. Well, if you've ever watched a Betty Boop cartoon, or you've watched a black and white Popeye cartoon, or you've seen the feature film Gulliver's Travels or Mr. Bug Goes to Town, or if you've ever watched the 17 or 18 Superman cartoons that were made by the Fleischer Studio, then you've seen a little of the work of the Fleischer Studio, which was founded by Max Fleischer, primarily with his brother Dave, although his other brothers worked there. And Max was a member of a group of animators that I really call the first generation. And this is people who were doing animation at the time of World War I, before and then just after. So Max headed up a studio that produced an incredibly popular cartoon during the silent era, featuring Coco the Clown. If you've never seen an Out of the Inkwell, just go on YouTube. And I would suggest just Googling on YouTube, searching on YouTube, Earth Control, Coco's Earth Control. And you're going to see a black and white silent short that's going to just knock you out. He made a successful transition to sound. And during the 1930s, the top names in animation in this country was Walt Disney and Max Fleischer in terms of the in terms of the audience appeal and popularity. And of course, I dare to say this in front of you, but there was a whole period of time when the Popeye cartoons were actually outgrossing the Mickey Mouse cartoons in the theaters. But so that's who Max Fleischer was. And I've been working on this project too many years, but have now wrapped it up with a second of 2 books. There's 2 more Fleischer projects that are possibly going to come out with my assistance. But I divided the time divided the story between 2 books bound by location. Max Fleischer was born in Austria, immigrant. One of the animators, Grim Natwick, great animator, said to me, these were people viewing America through fresh eyes. These were jazz era Americans. Max was an inventor. He did an invention called the rotoscope, which if you watch almost any special effects movie, even today, you'll notice a line about who did rotoscoping, even in an era of CGI. So he had a very profound influence on the animation industry, not only on the artistic side, but also on the technological side. And I'll give you one more quick example.
Sure.
I don't know if you've seen the Cuphead show on Netflix.
Yes.
Okay. That is a love letter to Max Fleischer and the guy Fleischer Studio, to the extent that they even use the three-dimensional backdrops to create a 3D effect, which is something that Max developed in the mid-1930s. So those Cuphead guys, they're all Fleischer fans, and what they do and how they do it is very. If Max was alive today, he would certainly recognize the homage that was being paid to him and his studio.
Now, how did you specifically develop an interest in Max Fleischer and his work? When did you first really take notice and take interest in that particular animator and animation studio's work?
Okay, so when I was a little kid, and I'm 70 years old, so when I was a little kid, it was every television station in America had a local kids program with cartoons. And when I was growing up here in Springfield at 105 Navajo Road in 16 acres, I watched Popeye cartoons. I watched Popeye cartoons so much that our TV repairman, who when he comes in to fix the set, there's a concept that doesn't exist any longer because we just throw them away now. He called me Popeye. So that was my nickname from that guy. Later on, I just became a movie crazy teenager, movie crazy college student, and I saw a retrospective of Fleischer cartoons at the Pleasant Street Theater in Northampton. I believe that was 1975. And in the naivete of my youth, the hubris of my youth, I said, someone ought to write a book about them. And I got permission from Richard Fleischer, Max's son, the film director who, by the way, worked for Walt Disney. He did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That was one of Richard's many credits. And Richard's sister, Max's daughter, Ruth, lived in New York, and she opened the door for me. She gave me phone numbers of people who worked at the studio. And so I was very fortunate. I got to talk to a lot of people. They were, to a person, extremely gracious to me. But publishers at that time had no interest in a book. And also seeing all of the cartoons I need to see, going through the archives I need to see, it's really tough when you live in Western Massachusetts, because that material is basically in New York, Library of Congress in Washington, and in Los Angeles. So I did what I did. I couldn't get a break from a publisher. Or eventually, Richard Fleischer wrote his own book about his father. But with the advent of the internet, I realized I could see a lot of these cartoons thanks to YouTube. And with the advent of the internet, I realized that there were sites that had information that I could easily access and research and dig through, like trade publications. So between trade publications, seeing the cartoons, being able to weld that together with the interview material, that's how eventually the book came about. The first book was published in 2022. I didn't want to try to sell a $50 book, so I broke it down into two $25 books. Always conscious of price point these days. So that's how it came about. My biggest regret is that none of the people who I interviewed are alive today. They've all passed, so none of them saw this. However, one of the Fleischer animators, Myron Waldman, who was one of their directors, really, who became a very, very close friend, his two sons were very appreciative of the book. So that made me feel good. But this all came about because, nobody didn't tell me I couldn't write a book. So I did. I went through that. So the second book is all about Max's decision to leave New York City and build a state-of-the-art animation studio in Miami. And this is what ended his career. It ended his career in terms of he had to borrow money from Paramount, his distributor, to build the studio. They had a contract, and then Paramount made the decision to call the note in. It was a 10-year mortgage, and they called the note in after about a year and a half, and took over the studio, got rid of Max and Dave, moved the studio back to New York City. The irony is that despite that unhappy ending, the Fleischers produced some of their best work when they were in Miami, despite the fact that, if you're in the film business and you're in New York City, there are sound stages, there are recording studios, there are labs, there's all of that infrastructure for that industry. In Miami, there was nothing. And he had a very self-contained studio, but that worked against him ultimately. The one story that I put in this book, and it wasn't until I was able to confirm it. I interviewed a woman who worked for Max many, many years, Edith Vernick, and Edith, people told me when you talk to Edith, she's a little odd. And I traveled to Atlantic City, New Jersey. This was way before the casino era. Edith had stale ginger ale and stale Doritos, flat ginger ale, stale Doritos. She proudly told me as my snack, and I had to sit there and dutifully eat that while I was talking to her. And she told me a story that I found remarkable, which I think you'll get a kick out of. So in August of 1941, Walt Disney was flying through Miami on his way to South America. There's an excellent book that you can get online through, I can't remember which Disney website it is, but it details the fact that President Roosevelt had asked Walt Disney to make these trips to South America and to produce movies that would be goodwill between the United States and South American countries, because they were afraid that the Nazis were going to also court these countries.
Right.
So to get to Brazil, Walt Disney flew through Miami. He went across the country, flying through Miami. So Edith told me that Max said to her, "Hey, I want you to come out to the Miami airport." Okay. So they drove out to the Miami airport, and there was Walt Disney. He had requested a meeting while he was on a layover at the airport with Max. Now, these guys, they were not pals.
Now, to that point, I recall hearing, and I think that this is something that his son had related, was that whenever there was a mention of Walt Disney's name, Max would say, "That son of a bitch."
Yeah, Max was the sort of old school European guy, and
yeah,
I've heard that he would say that, but at the same time, there was a level of reserve. So anyway, the two guys met, and Disney was there to ask Max if he would invest in the Disney studio. And when Edith told me that, I'm going, holy crap. Holy crap. Are you kidding me? Well, so what I've done years later is confirmed that where Walt was, when he was, and to confirm, and that was, the second one was a lot easier than the first, just how much financial trouble he was. I mean, we look at his films and we go, well, they're masterpieces of animation. They must have been celebrated. Well, Pinocchio was a huge financial flop.
Yeah.
Huge. He followed that up with Fantasia. That was a huge flop. He was going public. He had to announce all of his finances. he was like $1 million in the hole. And we're not just talking $1 million now. We're talking $1,941. That's a considerable amount more than what $1 million is now. So he turned to his biggest rival and to the guy who had the second biggest studio in the industry for help. And of course, Max couldn't help him because at that point, Paramount had taken over his studio. It sort of boggles the mind if Max didn't have that problem, if Max had said, okay, let's invest, what the future of both of those studios would have looked like. Who knows?
It could have been a monumental turn in the history of entertainment overall.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I was very happy to be able, and I've never told that story in any public kind of way because I wanted to have greater comfort with corroboration. Mm-hmm. So, that's in the book. Of course, I talked about what happened to everyone after the studio ended, talked about their influence on animation. When I had the animation magazine Animato from 92 to 97, I interviewed a lot of the current animators, people who were doing work for Cartoon Network, people who were doing work for Nickelodeon. And, you start asking them what their influences are. And the Fleischer cartoons are right up there. The Disney cartoons are not. And part of that reason is Disney did not release his cartoons to TV like the other studios did. There were no Mickey Mouse packages of cartoons playing on local television stations, but there were the Fleischer cartoons and there were the Warner Brothers cartoons. Very much those two were the big hits with kids in the 1950s and 60s. So this current batch of animators, that's what they saw. Warners and Fleischers, and it greatly influenced them. So,
well, that was going to be my next question was, where do you see, where do you see Max Fleischer's legacy now? Where in animation, in filmmaking, entertainment, and, you've mentioned several examples of that to this point. So, I mean, obviously this is, and I think that it's a great point that you make that these were things that were much more easily accessible and consumable for future generations of animators and entertainers. So it's certainly I haven't had a chance to read the book yet. I'm looking forward to having a chance. I'm still trying to get through. I'll readily admit, with the amount of reading that I do in my job, pleasure reading has taken a real back seat. And a lot of times I'm just like, I just can't read another word at the end of the day. So right now I'm going through, I've picked up Mel Brooks's autobiography, All About Me. And once I'm done with that, I'm intending on picking up these books and learning more about something that, truthfully, I outside of stories that you've told in the past, I haven't had a lot of exposure to.
Well, as far as his legacy goes, I've been repeatedly interviewed and used as a information resource by a producer who is producing a 6-hour miniseries on the Fleischer Studio. I've been interviewed now twice, and they'll send me emails. They're looking for stuff that I can help them with. And once this hits, I think that there's going to be a big explosion of interest. What also is helping is that the Max Fleischer family has been working with several entities in restoring cartoons. And recently I was at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City for 2 screenings of these restored cartoons. I'm very, very happy to say that the audience, which was a very mixed audience, just loved the cartoons. It was very heartening. And again, if any of the Fleischer folks could have seen the reaction, they would have understood their legacy. So there's things coming up. I'm good friends with a young man named Tommy Stathis, who is he's got the largest private archive of silent animation, perhaps in the world. He puts out Blu-rays of restored cartoons from his collection. He's working on a Fleischer volume. So there is interest, and it's very, it's very heartening to me. Because, growing up, there were two people that the film industry, in terms of criticism and history, took seriously. And one was Walt Disney, and the other one was Chuck Jones from Warner Brothers. And everyone else was sort of like cast aside. But in any event, there's growing interest. There'll be more growing interest in this subject within the next year or so.
All right, so moving on to your next book is it's titled "What They Didn't Teach You in Journalism School." Now, this one had a little bit different, obviously different of a premise and a little bit different of an approach in terms of writing it. So, why don't you walk us through what the inspiration and the process was for this one?
Okay, so a very close friend of mine is a Vermont-based writer named Joe Citro. And folks, just Google Joseph Citro, and you're going to find all these wonderful books that he has written, horror novels. He wrote the scariest freaking book I've ever read called Deus Ex. I mean, the concept I won't even repeat here, but it's really, really good. But also Joe has specialized in weird New England history. And Joe and our mutual friend, Steve Bissett, and I, for many years, we get together, we do these road trips. Joe would orchestrate it. So we'd visit these spots we went to New Hampshire, we went to Maine, we went to Vermont. They'd come down. I'd bring them around Western Massachusetts. Odd things, inexplicable things sometimes. So Joe says to me one day, a buddy of his, who's a writer, challenged him to write a 100-chapter book with each chapter consisting of 100 words. So Joe did. His book is called Loose Change, and it's about his life growing up in Vermont. And I said to myself, and Joe challenged me then. That's how this happened. He challenged me. He threw the glove down. And I said, well, I'm not a statewide known celebrity like Joe is. So I've got to keep this a lot more real and offer someone something other than a recounting of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I came up with the idea of all the stuff that we learn on the job as reporters and editors, all that stuff that they don't tell you. Okay, Chris, did anyone suggest to you how to take notes?
No, I mean, not anything that was particularly useful anyway.
Right. Okay. So you learned that. That's part of the stuff they didn't teach you in journalism school. You learned that on your own, trial and error. All of us. And people, I am so addicted to the reporter's notebook. If I don't have a reporter's notebook to take notes in, it doesn't feel right. It's almost like a physical affliction, It's like bending your arm the wrong way. But on the other hand, there was a reporter for our daily newspaper here. She has since passed. She was a very nice lady. She used legal pads and Sharpie pens. That's how she took notes. And I thought, wow, where did she come up with that? I don't know. But these are the types of things. You learn stuff on the job that they don't tell you. So I thought, okay, I'll split the book between how did I become a journalist? Why did I become a journalist? And then here's things I've learned. And it was a lot of fun. It is a book that you can only do with a computer that counts words. I want to tell you, nobody would want to take on this format if they had to go 1, 2, 3 and get to the end of that section and realize, okay, now I got to add a word. Do you count, how, are there words that you don't count? Are there words that you do count? So, I would write something, I would do the word count, then realize I either needed to add a word. And usually I got to the point where it was just like adding or subtracting one or two words. You sort of get a rhythm. And, so I would toss in some extra adjectives I could easily take out, So, I put this thing together. My buddy Mark Mestel, who is the designer for my books, he did a very nice cover on it. I supplied a basic image for him. And then I tried to illustrate the book so it wasn't just going to be page after page of text. And, the only thing I can say is that it's retailing for $10. But if you toss me an extra $1, I'll actually name names of some of the people who screwed me over. So it was fun to write. It was nostalgic to write. The chapter that I talk about, in the press release that you folks at the Reminder so graciously printed. Thank you. I was at this event at a park in Chicopee, Massachusetts. It was in the spring. I'm standing next to this young woman who was from a local TV station. She was a weathercaster. Obviously, they had a deficit of reporters that day. They pressed her into duty. Beautiful girl wearing this blood red cocktail dress, about as inappropriate a dress that you would want to wear to an outdoor press conference at a park. Now, she was tall and she had stiletto heels. And I noticed as the press conference went on, her shoulder was above my shoulder originally, and now her shoulder is underneath my shoulder. And I look down at her feet, and she's sinking into the mud, literally. And so I included that in the book with the message, wear sensible shoes. I don't care if you go on TV, if you go the TV route. No one is ever going to see your shoes. Okay. So you got to wear sensible shoes. And that whole idea, I was covering something and Ray Herschel, the legendary TV reporter from Western Mass News, he was there, and we were out in the middle of like a construction site. And I looked down, and Ray's got these great like LL Bean waterproof moccasin things. I go, Ray, I love your shoes, man. And he says, you never know what you're going to be in for, Dobbs. And he's right. When you go to work, you don't really know where you're going to go. But they don't teach you that in journalism school. They don't say, Don Trieger, the great photographer who works for our local daily. Don told me once he has jackets and coats of all types in his car. He doesn't, because this is New England. It could rain, it could snow. You got to be prepared. And especially if you're a photographer, you're going to be working outside. So I thought this kind of advice, it was fun to put together, and it's actually like real advice.
Yeah.
And no one at UMass, when I went, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, I mean, I graduated UMass in 1976. No one ever approached any of that kind of advice. They were teaching us how to write. They were teaching us how to get source material. But no one did all those little things that pop up in your career almost every day.
Now, one of the things that I learned of it, I know that you are a big fan of the fountain pen. That is the weapon of choice for you.
Yes, it is.
Now, my background being originally in sports, one of the things that a veteran reporter taught me was that when you're going to be out in the elements a lot, a pencil is your best friend.
Yes.
A pencil will never run. If it starts raining, the pencil is never going to run. And the ink is a pencil is never going to freeze if you're out there in the freezing cold. And that's something that I've, continued to do. I even prefer a regular pencil to a mechanical pencil because in certain weather conditions or whatever, that mechanical pencil may just decide to fail on you. So,
Oh, you're absolutely right. A regular old school wooden pencil is a lot more dependable. You just got to make sure that you've got like a jackknife in your rear pocket, or a pencil sharpener,
right.
just in case you break the lead. But no, it makes perfect sense. It makes absolutely perfect sense. So one wily veteran taught a new guy a tip that is very, very constructive. Very, very constructive.
Talking like this, it feels like a couple of like we're a couple of the old guard at this point. I was we were actually recording the podcast for Reminder Publishing, and I was discussing the recent anniversary of the tornado that passed through Western Massachusetts, which in and of itself almost feels like ancient history at this point.
Yep.
But I was realizing that the reporter that I was sitting across from and talking to was nowhere near having any consciousness of this, because he was a kid in Long Island at the time. And the more I thought about it, it was like, wow, I think that myself and Debbie Gardner are the only, members of the editorial staff remaining at this point who remember that, who were on staff when that happened.
Right.
So I'm quickly feeling like the old grizzled veteran in the newsroom. There are a couple people in the newsroom who are maybe of similar age to me, but the experience that I've incurred over the years with the Reminder and with my time other places before the Reminder, I really at times I'm just like, man, I'm not one of the kids anymore.
Welcome to the club. There are times where I get up, I look in the mirror and I go, you're not too bad looking, and you're, for a 7-year-old, and you got stuff that the kids don't have. Well, that's what gets me through the day, because in reality, the kids have got their own way of doing things. And I'm sure if I cover something for the Reminder, I'm with a group of reporters. Obviously, I'm the geezer. In fact, a lot of them don't even have notebooks. They're recording everything. They're recording the audio of an event on their phone. And it gets back to whatever works for you. You use the technology that you have. You and I coming up, we didn't have that kind of technology. Here's the 3 pieces of advice that I was given by my favorite professor at UMass, Ralph Whitehead. Number 1, when you're at a press conference and a competing reporter drops his or her pen or pencil, kick it across the room. Number 2, after the press conference, you got to get that story in before anybody else does. So that means you run to a payphone. Okay, we have to explain what a payphone is. You run to a payphone, and don't be afraid to use your elbows to get to that phone first to call the rewrite guy at the paper.
Now we have to explain what rewrite guys are to everybody too.
Yeah, because it used to be you send a reporter out, the reporter would get all the facts, then call another reporter sitting at a desk who would take all those facts and then massage it into a story. So by the time you got back to the paper, there would be a first draft of a story. That's how it used to work. And then number 3 is you're going to do all of your most important interviews in bars. And he added, what you do is you get the interview subject there, and you get a few drinks into him and loosen him up. Now, Chris, I can tell you, on one hand, I've had maybe 3 interviews that I've done at Theodore's in downtown Springfield because it was someplace central and nobody drank. There was one interview I didn't drink, and the interview subject didn't drink, but we were in a place that I think Ralph would have approved of me interviewing her, which was a strip bar. But we weren't drinking anyway. So I have never in all this time done an interview at a bar where I was trying to loosen someone up with alcohol in order to get something. But those were the rules that Ralph seriously taught us. God bless him. He's gone now, but God bless him. And I'm hoping before I kick off that I actually have a chance to interview a politician in a bar and loosen that person up with some drinks, and I can fulfill Ralph's promise. Maybe it won't happen, but maybe it will.
Well, one of the ways that the young kids are doing things these days is the advent of the podcast, and clearly we're on one now. So I'm trying this out, and you as well have launched your own, and I feel like this has been quite the learning experience for me. I'd imagine it has been for you as well. So what the podcast is the Ink-stained Wretch with G. Michael Dobbs, and you mentioned a little bit about it and what's your subject material, what your plans are. But if you want to go into a little bit more detail about what inspired you to start a podcast, and what your goal is.
I wanted to start a podcast because I still like reporting. And while I have at least 2 more books planned, I want to keep in the mix. And so the mix is doing interviews with people. So my podcast consists of a major interview, and then I do a rant, a column, so to speak, and then I also do a pick, a tip. This is people are going to think that I'm trying to be an influencer. I'm not a social influencer. I'm not. I was a freaking social influencer before certain people in this area who like to champion that format of information were even born. So I just want to tell people about cool stuff. Like one of my tips was Mrs. Mitchell's Irish Pub in Holyoke. I'm not getting a kickback. I'm not getting, a free Guinness from them. It's just that I want to share something that I've learned that I think other people might enjoy learning about. If I'm lucky enough to get paid commercial support down the road, everyone's going to know it's a commercial. My problem with social influencers is that they don't really want to talk about the fact that they are getting something out of this endorsement. And that what they need to do is to create a level of celebrity for themselves so they can do an endorsement from someone who people believe would, who are quote unquote famous. So, if they're saying it, it's got to be right. No, I'm much more transparent. I'm either doing stuff for free or you're going to hear a commercial and I'm going to tell you, hey, this is a crummy commercial. That's just the way I operate, so I just want to do it because I want to stay in the mix more. Okay. It's as simple as that. And it's, I've had some help. Some of my associates at Focus Springfield have helped me with some technical stuff. Christopher DeMauro has also helped me. He's a podcaster in the area. He's also helped me with some recommendations. It's a pretty steep learning curve. I'm still trying to figure out whether or not my stuff is on Spotify. I think it is, but I'm having I got to double check. I got to jump all through hoops to get onto Apple. And I know that I should have done all that stuff before I started the podcast, but I just wanted to get going. Because, if you delay too long because you're scared of making mistakes, then you'll never get going into something. So you just need to dive in and do the best you can. So I do have a Facebook page, the Ink-stained Wretch, with G. Michael Dobbs. The company that I'm working with is, I've been told they're putting stuff up all over the place. I got to double check that. But if you follow me personally on Facebook, or if you follow the page, you're going to see the links to the podcast. And so, in fact, tomorrow I'm going to be making a bunch of appointments to do interviews. The fun thing is the stuff is fairly, the gear that I've got is pretty, easy to cart around, so I can go to people, which I find makes some of the stuff easier. But we'll see what happens. I'm going to do it for a while, and hopefully I can build up an audience and I can satisfy my need for still being in the mix. And I got a few ideas for the future, and we'll see.
So, in terms of, you mentioned that one of the major parts of this is an interview component. What are some of the interviews that you've done so far, or that maybe you've got coming up that you'd like to tease, that things that you've been really excited about that have gone the podcast way so far?
So far I've done 3 episodes. My first episode was with Mayor Garcia of Holyoke, talking about issues in that city. I talked to David Barcelo, Chicopee School Committee member and retired art teacher, who has gained now international attention about his work exposing modern artist Roy Lichtenstein. In fact, the reason I did this is that Dave is in a new documentary about it. I just did one with Marty Langford. Marty is a professor of film at American International College, and he did in 2015 a documentary called Doomed, which was all about Roger Corman's Fantastic Four movie. It's a great documentary. It's up on Tubi right now. In fact, the documentary that Dave Barcelo is also up on the Tubi streaming service. And the reason I did an interview with Marty right now is that there's an effort by one of the cast members to try to convince Disney/Marvel to release the film finally. It's a fascinating story. And you know, the release of the Snyder version of the Justice League is sort of inspired other people who were involved with the movie that didn't get out the right way, or was, in this case, squashed, to try to get it before an audience. Let's see. So I'm going to tag my my good pal Bob Charlin, Bob the Bike Guy. He's doing some really interesting new stuff. Matt Safransky from Western Mass Policy and Politics. I want to talk to him about our summer of races, or our summer of not so many races. That's coming up. So there's people I want to do. I'm waiting for an opportunity to go see my buddy Joe, and we're just going to talk about like weird Massachusetts stuff. And so as people are suggesting themselves to me now, and people are being recommended. So I'm just trying to, I like the idea of doing 2 or 3 interviews, as long as they're not particularly timely, in a week. So then you can work on putting them together and the other stuff. That's I think would be pretty prudent of me. So in any event, that's what I'm doing. I do want to get our mutual friend, Matt Conway, to join a once a month, what am I watching, event, with a couple different people like, Steve Bissett and probably Marty and myself and Matt. I understand that the two of you did a judgment or a critical review of all the Disney features. I was heartbroken, didn't ask for my opinion, but that's okay. Because you know what I would have said.
Well, yes, we've actually done a couple of things. I initially had him on just kind of talking about movies in general, and then we did the Disney bracket thing, and then we just recently had a conversation on. We had both recently rewatched Star Wars: The Phantom Menace for its 25th anniversary, so I had some thoughts on that, and so we kicked those around for a bit. So Matt's been great to have on, and I look forward to hearing you guys What,
Yeah,
batting it back and forth. I've been telling you and Matt, you've got to start something like on YouTube that's kind of like the Mystery Science Theater kind of thing. I feel like that would be gold.
well,
It could
yeah,
it could be
that's
it
a
could
great
be
guy.
it could be a kind of a blend of Mystery Science Theater and the two guys in the balcony for the Muppets. Like you could blend those two together, and I think that it would be just terrific.
Well, the other thing I did, and it was a lot of fun. I did another DVD commentary. My buddy Steve was hired to do a commentary for a 1945 Republic Pictures horror movie called The Lady and the Monster, and it's a favorite of mine. I love movies made by Republic, who are best known for the Roy Rogers and Gene Autry westerns. But in any event, so I went up to Vermont and we sat in his screening room and we did this, and it's out on Keener Lorber. Keener Lorber put together a package of 4 of these Republic horror movies from the 1940s. So that was a lot of fun. So maybe Matt and I could do like alternative DVD commentaries, like commentaries for movies that don't have commentaries. That could be interesting, and we could tell people watch the film and listen to us at the same time. It's not going to be as good as Riff Tracks, which they do something similar, but I think we could have. I think we could be a little bit amusing and informative and have some fun doing something like that. I'll have to talk to Matt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you mentioned you have some social media for the podcast. I will be linking to that in the show notes for this episode. But if you want to, again, let people know how they can find you, where they can find you, where can they find you and how can they find you?
Okay, so until further notice, the easiest way is just to go to the Facebook page for the Ink-stained Wretch with G. Michael Dobbs, news and views from Western Massachusetts. Subscribe to that. You're gonna see the link every week to the podcast, and then hopefully very soon I will crawl out of my ignorant state and know where it is on Spotify and Apple, and I can start pimping that information out as hard and fast as I can, because there's only 30 million podcasts out there. It's really astonishing just how many people are doing this, but it's fun. And what I'm hoping to do is to create that little mini niche market for people who want to hear stuff from their home region. That's
Sure.
My goal here.
All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and of course, we've just mentioned your affinity for the movies as well. So I have to ask: is there anything that you are looking forward to seeing? We're just getting into the summer blockbuster season, so is there anything that from that, or is there anything flying a little bit more under the radar that you're looking to see and that you're excited about?
Well, the big film of the summer for me will be the Deadpool Wolverine movie. That's going to be, I hope, as much fun as the first 2 movies. So I have to say that is something. I saw Furiosa, which I thought was quite good, a little bit too long. But it was quite good. I love seeing Chris Hemsworth as a villain with a fake nose. That was pretty hilarious. But I've been, the thing is that there's so many movies I've missed. So I've been watching a lot of stuff on DVD that I've bought, stuff that people will shake their head and say, why is he watching Perry Mason movies made in the mid 1930s by Warner Brothers? But I did. I just sometimes I want to learn why someone who was so valued as an entertainer 70, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, what was their thing? So I just sat through 2 Eddie Cantor movies, and I don't expect you to know who Eddie Cantor is.
No.
I'm 70 years old. I barely know who Eddie Cantor is, but he was a huge star on Broadway and then on radio, and he did some movies. And so I just watched Whoopi from 1930. I had to watch it in chunks because it was so freaking bad. I just couldn't do it all in one sitting. You know, you had to break it down to bite-sized morsels, you know. So I've been watching a lot of stuff that I've bought, and I just watched James Cruise's 1923 Western epic called The Covered Wagon, which was one of the first films to try to depict the American West in an accurate manner, and it was a surprisingly good feature for 1923. So that's what I've been doing. I have to admit, a lot of the stuff that's in theaters today doesn't really work for me. And unfortunately, you know, sitting in Springfield, Massachusetts, it's either what Cinemark in West Springfield is deciding to play or what Regal's deciding to play. And it's frustrating when a lot of their choices aren't very adventurous. So thank God for the pile of DVDs that I've got by the TV that I just go and say, oh, tonight is this night. You know, I go down to Vinegar Syndrome's store in Bridgeport, Connecticut about every 6 weeks, and I stock up on used DVDs, films that I want to see, or new DVDs of films that I'm sure that you and Matt would find so arcane and so bizarre. The company is now restoring a whole bunch of Hong Kong action movies, and I bought 2 recently, and they're absolutely glorious examples of 1980s Hong Kong filmmaking, where basically they did anything and everything in these movies. I mean, you can have a love story sandwiched in between a vicious martial arts fight. You can have a space alien show up for no particular reason. I mean, the films are wild. So that's what I've been watching. But I am looking forward to Deadpool 3 very much. So I know it's a almost indefensible and odd taste that I have, but that's me. Luckily, I have friends I can call them up and say, "Oh my God, I just saw Lady Reporter with Cynthia Rothrock, and it is incredible." And they'll actually know what I'm saying about.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. As Mike mentioned before, you can find the Ink-stained Wretch podcast on Facebook, and all the information that you need on how to consume that podcast will present itself to you as soon as you hit like. So I encourage you to do so. And Mike, again, thank you very much. We'll have to get together soon, and we'll give that Scotch ale that you were telling me about a try.
I would be happy to share one with you, Chris, and thank you so much for doing this. I deeply appreciate it.
Well, that wraps another edition of the Maza's Musings podcast. I want to thank G. Michael Dobbs for joining me. Mike, it was a pleasure. It's always great to talk with you, whether it's talking shop about journalism, or sometimes you're just talking about things that I really just don't have a comprehension of. But it's great to hear you talk about things with such enthusiasm. It's one of the things that I've loved working with you, and I am so glad that we're able to continue talking about things like this through a different medium. I want to thank all of you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast, and I would ask, if you did enjoy it, to tell your friends, your family, whoever, that you just listened to a great podcast. I'd also love it if you shared our social media or interacted with us on our social media. It's the Maza's Musings podcast on Facebook. We also have Maza's Musings Pod on Instagram. There's the website, mazasmusings.com. mazasmusings@wordpress.com. And as always, feel free to reach out to me at mazasmusings@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from all of you in whatever format you decide to interact. I appreciate all of it. And once again, I appreciate you listening. So until next time, have a great weekend and a great week.